buying this motherboard? Did you
I don't have it yet. I don't want to pull my wallet out in front of a camera. That's probably a bad call. But I am going to buy it.
Is this going to be the middle of just you buying things throughout this entire show?
Ooh,
hold on just a minute. Searching for it as you're going through. Let's see. Are we coming in? We're
live.
Oh, we are live. Okay. I was just checking the monitor up there. All right. So we let me just pull this up. Looks like we're live. Hello, everyone. This is Close to the Metal. This is our computing podcast where we come on live every week on Facebook and YouTube and talk about computing and specific aspects of it. And today we are talking about gaming PCs. There's always that choice, the options that you have there. Do you build it yourself? Do you pay someone else to build one for you or get a fancy boutique one? Or do you just buy one off the shelf? I mean, there's pros and cons, I think, to every one of them, but that's what we want to hear from you today if you are watching live. Let us know. I'm Greg Nibbler, here with
Brad Burke.
Mr. Brad Burke. And Brad is probably going to be buying things throughout the show while we're talking about it because you have found some deal online and he doesn't want to tell you what the deal is, I think is what the problem was. So
tell
now
you
we're
at the end of the show.
Tell you at the end of the show.
Hang on to the end of the show, you'll
That's
get a good deal
what
on a
it's gonna
motherboard.
be. All right, well, let's get going here. So I'm seeing already some comments coming in here on Facebook just about this. And we're going to kind of go through each one of these options that you have. And I think first we're going to talk about buying a boutique system, like a pre-built system, but more of a custom side to it. And we're going to get into that. Let's see. Alan says, if you know enough about computers, then of course you can build your own. True. Let's see. Mark is just asking for a shout out. Mark, you have to say something, but now you already got it, so that worked, I guess. Mian says Alienware is awesome, and that's true. So if you're buying a pre-built system, an Alienware system, and let's get into the very first one here that I know you wanted to bring up as far as what system you want to talk about.
The Origin Neuron.
Origin Neuron. So let's kind of go through, I guess, what we're looking at with these specs. So this is something that you can buy. Where do you go to buy this one?
You would buy it online on their site.
You would buy it online,
so
just straight from them.
Origin is one of a number of sort of what you call like a boutique or custom PC builder.
I keep using the word boutique. Is that the right word to use?
Yeah, it's like a fair word to use.
I feel weird once you say boutique too many times in a row. It sounds weird. But
it is really. I mean, like the whole thing is supposed to be that it's a very bespoke experience. So when you go to Origin, you choose from their 5 different sizes and form factors and cases, and then you choose from those and you say this is the processor I want, this is how much RAM I want, what storage solutions I want, here are the graphics cards I want, the power supply I want, and oftentimes they've selected a pre-select group of they're saying these are the power supplies that we're going to use. It's a couple of EVGAs and a Thermaltake or something, and they say these are the parts that we've already picked, that we believe to be the right choices, and you can pick from them.
So so you can go through each specific aspect of the computer.
Yes, and you do, and then that's like how you put the whole thing together. Is by deciding, making all these decisions. So in our case, we got one that had a Core i7 7700K, 32 gigabytes of 3000 megahertz memory, 2 GTX 1080 Ti's, and a 512 gigabyte Samsung 960 Pro. Which these are all off-the-shelf parts that someone could go to Fry's or Micro Center or Newegg or whatever and buy.
You could go pick this up
yourself. You can
yourself.
go pick up all these parts on your own. They put it in a Fantex Evolve case, which you can also go buy from Fantex site. And that being said, just because you can buy these parts off the shelf doesn't mean they're bad in any way. And in fact, these are some of the most tried and tested parts on the market right now. This is a very high-end PC. And that's something that, again, like I could technically build that same PC in there, but the same parts would cost me $3,200 to $3,500, and the system was only $4,000.
Right, and you don't have to do any of the work of putting it all together. You don't have to worry about doing something wrong on it. You can just pay these guys. You get it, and you get the amazing cases because you were talking about the chassis. Pretty great looking for it.
It is
so there are some benefits then to doing that. In that you already know these are the best options out there. Like that, they have some of them. They're saying you can go through these. You don't have to worry about making sure you find the right deal. You don't have to worry about shopping for each individual thing. Seeing some of the comments coming through. Jacob says self-built only. Nice sleeving though. Yeah, so that's pretty much what we were talking about. Let's see. Ken says I built my own computer 3 years ago for graphic design. Basically, a gaming computer, still faster 3 years later than any pre-built stock computer. And we're going to talk about off-the-shelf computers here in a second too, just for the different options that you have for buying a gaming PC. PC. And it seems like most of the people tuning into this show right now are going to be in the build your own category.
Although, I'm definitely in that camp too. I'm definitely the kind of person, like I said, I'm looking at buying a motherboard right now for a computer that I have not even started planning yet. So, but that said, I was very, very impressed with this Neuron because, like someone was saying, you get like sleeved cables, you get these things, these sort of these high-end things that would cost you quite a bit. To get a full set of sleeved cables for a power supply is $100. And that's something, again, it's baked into the price of this thing so that they're still making money. But you get these nice touches like the sleeve cables and the good cable management, RAID arrays, like all these sort of extra little bits that would take extra time. And you can also really, like, we've gotten PCs in that have open loop liquid cooling, which is super, super cool when you have, a reservoir full of liquid and tubes running between all your different parts and radiators. And, like, it's super cool. And it's something that I've never done. Like, I've watch people do it a lot, and I think it's super cool. But it's something that you can just pay them to do, and they'll do all the troubleshooting for it. They'll do all of the work in bending the tubes. And, part of that, too, is that they have all these parts just sitting around. Like Origin and Falcon Northwest, these places have Gorilla racks full of GPUs.
Yeah, so, and they've gotten them probably at a much lower price than you're going to buy just buying a single one. Right. So you're getting the bulk price, although, with their, of course, markup built into it. But I don't know. I kind of like this option if it were me, only because obviously I am not a skilled gaming PC builder. I would be terrified that I'm going to do something wrong. But if I can go to them, be like, okay, I've got all the top line stuff. It is a little bit more money than probably if I could go out and find each thing, or I don't know. Is it?
Well,
it
necessarily doesn't have to be, right? Yeah. That's the thing is that the price difference is pretty short already between buying the parts for this high-end system, but because it's totally bespoke, you can choose to say, well, I only need a 128 gigabyte SSD, and I just need 8 gigabytes of RAM, and I just need one graphic. I don't need two $700 graphics cards in my machine necessarily, and that's something that as with off the shelf, with all these things, you sort of get to choose, but it's more direct here, where you can say, I have exactly $1,300 to spend, and I'm going to get exactly what I need from this company for that $1,300 or whatever you're spending.
And you got to pick and choose, and if you go lighter on this, go heavier on this. Yeah, based on that. Taking a look at some of the comments here, again, as they're coming through. So if you're just tuning in, this is Close to the Metal, our computing podcast, talking about gaming PCs. Right now, talking about buying a custom pre-built one from a kind of a boutique dealer. We're talking specifically about the Origin Neuron computer and things like that you can purchase, where you can kind of pick and choose from the parts that they have. And we'll get into some of the other options here as well. Let's see. Ontario says the only reason I'd build my own is for budget reasons. Things I can go without or get a lesser version of can save money. I'd buy pre-built if I wanted something well-designed, top of the line. So that's kind of how I was looking at it too. You already know they're experts. They know what they're doing, and you can pick and choose what they have in there. Clearly, there are people also watching right now who are very skilled at building their own, but that is a skill, and it's also kind of intimidating. I think if you're just getting into it, to try to just be like, okay, I'm going to build a gaming PC, that can seem to be kind of an intimidating process.
Totally.
Of something to go through. So we were talking about the Origin Neuron, which is one that Brad kind of reviewed, and you're saying this is a good option to go into.
I really, really enjoyed it. A lot of these, as we'll get to, not all of these custom-built PCs are these home-built PCs, I should say, are necessarily perfect. And again, we've had custom PCs that don't really live up to that standard either. We've also had places like Falcon Northwest that have done this for years and years and years.
Been doing it forever.
Exactly, and some of their computers are really beautiful. Like the Tiki is like this tiny MITX thing that you couldn't build it at home if you wanted to. So there's some advantages to be had there, definitely, if you go the boutique route.
If you go in that boutique route, so a lot of options out there for you to choose. Origin Neuron. There's a full review too at digitaltrends.com that you can take a look at for that one in particular of what we're talking about. So let's go on from there, talking about this, the boutique one, to buying one off the shelf. We're going to get into build your own too. Don't worry. We're going to get to the build your own side of it and talk pretty extensively about that. But if you were going to skip this route, and probably, I would assume you'd save a little bit of money if you went just straight off the shelf. I mean, price-wise, what's the difference between going to a boutique dealer and going off the shelf?
Yeah, so when we're talking about off-the-shelf systems, we're definitely talking about things like Asus, Alienware, HP. Someone, Jacob, brought up HP Omen, and that is like more of a pre-built PC like we would talk about here. And he talks about, something we'll get into is that some of them have really odd issues. For example, the HP Omens were built to be sort of VR ready, so they put a USB port or a HDMI port in the front so that you could run your cables straight out of the front instead of wrapping them around the back. that turned out it caused a lot of issues for people trying to actually hook up a monitor to it, and it's sort of causing these headaches.
Pain in the ass, yeah,
because it's this proprietary thing that they've done, and that you can't really like. If you had your own parts or you had off-the-shelf parts and a team working with you that had, at places like Origin and Falcon give you lifetime technical support. So if you have an issue, you can just call them and say like, "Hey, my HDMI port isn't working."
That's worth a ton right there. You have lifetime tech support.
Yeah.
That would be a big
So that's something to think about. But yeah, definitely like these bespoke PCs. So one we checked out is the Asus Strix Gd 30Ci, and it's kind of an odd PC. The price point is good. Our build, I believe, was about $1,900, and it had a GTX 1080 in it and a Core i7 7700, not the overclocked one.
Okay.
So, it's fine. It has 32 gigabytes of RAM.
That seems like for a high-end gaming PC, that's pretty low end.
Yeah.
Right?
So, yeah, I mean, so it's a good deal in that sense.
But it's still a lot of money,
but there are some issues with this system. For one, the chassis that they put it in isn't an off-the-shelf chassis. It's a custom Asus chassis, and it's sort of plastic and metal in combination, mostly plastic. And they've done this thing where it's like a black case with these white panels on it, and you can remove the panels to like put them somewhere else on the case and like move them around. Yeah, and it feels kind of chintzy.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there are some kind of building issues too. They claim that there's advanced cooling when there's just a single exhaust fan in the back.
That's the
advanced. It's the exhaust fan, the CPU fan, and the GPU fan. So that's just the three. There's no intake in the front. There's no intake in the bottom. It's just some vents.
Okay.
And so we did find that it really quickly hit thermal thresholds. If we tried to run handbrake on it, it would really quickly heat up, and they had to actually set the thermal threshold quite low on the CPU to prevent it from getting much hotter because there's no good way to exhaust the air.
Yeah.
And there was issues like, they used a reference card that they had built that was sort of unbranded 1080 that, I don't know, it was stock clock. It wasn't overclocked or anything like that, which is one of the reasons, this Neuron, they have CPUs and GPUs sitting around so they can overclock the snot out of these things.
Yeah.
And if something goes wrong, they just put it back on the shelf and they figure it out later. They reset the BIOS,
Right.
So they actually sent us the 7700K, the Origin did, that was 5.1 gigahertz, which is a crazy high overclock. It's the highest we've seen ever, especially in a system that just comes out of the box to you that way.
Right.
So
you don't have to do anything. You've just got it.
Yeah, and now you've got this Asus that is, it's stock clock processor that can't be turned up and is already kind of throttled. It's a GPU that doesn't have proper intake for because it's just breathing hot air all the time. A motherboard that's not necessarily well feature equipped. It's just the motherboard that Asus had that they put in there.
Yeah.
So it's not not a terrible computer, but there's definitely a lot of advantage there or not as much advantage as going to one of these custom places and getting exactly what you need.
Yeah, and talking about that, and again, we're going to get into building it yourself here in a second, but just versus going for the custom built, like boutique dealer versus an off-the-shelf system. I mean, what is, right now, everything seems like that's the advantage is to go to the custom boutique, build at your build center. But, I mean, I guess you're saving a lot of money. Are you saving much money if you did off-the-shelf?
I mean, you could spend just as much because, again, it's going to depend on your performance needs. But there's still, a decent markup on that. Yeah, I would say the markup from it's probably that system that Asus sent us is probably about a $1,200 system if you built it at home.
Okay,
so it's almost the same markup in terms of dollars that it is as buying the $4,000 Origin. Like you're kind of spending a flat fee to get it built that way, so you might as well go to the company that's using the very best parts. Like someone was saying, they did the bespoke setup, and they got the best parts. They got to choose the ones that were the right parts, and you get to make sure that like this company, like Origin, is not going to cheap out on fans. Yeah, fans are cheap. Asus has fans everywhere, and why they wouldn't just throw an extra one in the front?
That's really strange to me. Yeah, so, why you wouldn't do that? But and again, we'd love to hear your comments and questions too. If you're on Facebook and YouTube, let us know what you think about this. As far as have you ever bought an off-the-shelf gaming PC before, gaming system, and what your thoughts were on it? Did you enjoy it or not, or did you find that it was not worth it and you should have just gone to the boutique side? I mean, I guess I can see one thing, with. Like just if budget is the absolute concern, you still want a game, but you have a budget set at this, and you cannot change from that. Maybe that would be one way to go.
Yeah,
that's kind of how I can see it. And you're doing other things on it as well, obviously. But yeah, that's I'm not seeing a whole lot. Jacob's asking, do laptops count? I mean, I don't think there's a. I mean, as far as the gaming laptop,
and gaming laptops are still in a kind of an awkward place.
Yeah. And Jeffrey is saying you can spend just as much on a pre-built that you can on a custom build and get more for your money.
I see, and I don't think you can anymore as much because because the markup has gotten so much slimmer on these custom built, these boutique PCs, and the things that they're providing are really tangible benefits to your computing experience. You know, it's not just, you know, the cables that look nice and the RGB lighting. Like, it really is, you know, things like proper cooling, overclocking, which has a noticeable performance benefit. You know, things especially people have talked about using CAD, using Blender, using Premiere, and things like that. They're money. You know, you're saving time and you're saving money by doing so. And if you have those things where you can buy a part and then let them overclock it and let them push an extra 30% performance out of it, that's a really good deal. That's a very good deal. And there's, you know, there's a big advantage there that, you know, there are good, I'm not saying there aren't good pre-built PCs and there aren't crummy boutique PCs.
Sure.
But I would
say
there's
crummy everything. But,
sure.
But overall, you're saying it is a really good option going to the boutique dealers.
I think so. You know, and especially you can just custom, you know, as Jeffrey's saying here, custom build can cost more, but you can upgrade without voiding a warranty. That's a big thing. On the Asus, you can't open it or you void the warranty.
Oh.
So on one side, you've got them saying, like,
so
we're using off-the-shelf parts. Put in an extra hard drive. Put in more RAM. We'll help you. Call us, and we'll walk you through it. And on the other side, you've got Asus saying, like, don't you open that case. There's a sticker on the back.
You touch it,
which
my
is
hands
not,
are off.
it's not just Asus. That's totally common. We've seen that from MSI before, too. They do that. And it's, you know, they want to control that warranty process, and it makes sense because a lot of these things, like gaming PCs, you put a lot of stress on them. You put a lot of heat through them.
Right.
You're running them at 100% load for hours on end. And it's really, it can damage parts and it can cause them to lose money because now you're coming back to them with this, you know, barely scraping a profit margin PC and being like, I need a new GPU, and they have to give you one.
Yeah. So that's there's definitely some different aspects of that. I mean, for me, going to the pre-built custom boutique, I'm still sold on the lifetime tech support. I mean, that's a huge advantage that you can call up an expert at any time and just be like, hey, I want to change this out. How do I, you know, can you help me? Can you walk me through just a little bit of it?
Totally.
That's pretty great.
And a lot of them, too, I know Falcon Northwest and Digital Storm, I think, do, if you buy a part through them, like an upgrade part, then you can send the computer back to them and they'll install everything for you and send it back.
That's awesome.
So
there's
a lot of bonuses.
You know, helping out a smaller business, too. That's pretty cool to me. But taking a look here at some of the comments that are coming through, and again, now we're going to get into here in just a second, building it yourself, which seems to be, for a lot of people watching, that's the option that they go with, which is, you know, definitely a more advanced thing. Jeffrey is saying custom built can cost more, but you can upgrade without voiding a warranty.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, that's what we were talking about there with the Asus side. Yeah, George says, yeah, markups, bottom lines, big companies take the shortcuts. A lot of marketing built into the price. That's true.
Yeah, and with that Asus, that was definitely true. There's a lot of, like, these things, like this customization that they're promising, which is really just, you know, it's these little white plates that you can click on and off.
Yeah.
You know, these things sort of, they check off boxes on a list, but they don't really fulfill the feature like you need them to.
Yeah, need some kind of a shiny part for them to move. Check. Like that's kind of where they're at with that. All right. Well, let's get into talking about building it yourself. Like actually getting down there, and I know this, as we were saying before we even started, Brad's already buying a motherboard for a computer sometime in the future that he hasn't even decided to build yet.
It has a 3-year warranty, so if I need to RMA it, you know, if I don't build it for 8 months and I need to RMA it, it's fine.
So how hard is it? I mean, and again, we're talking about experts here, a lot of people that are watching right now, but just to give a brief overview, like your first steps, you want to build your own. What do you suggest somebody do?
Somebody actually threw a link that I love into chat. PCPartPicker.com is a super awesome site that lets you can literally say, like, here's the GPU I want, and it'll tell you, here are the motherboards that you can buy, and you can say, well, there's the motherboard I want. Well, here are the CPUs I can buy, or however you want to do it.
Yeah.
It checks for compatibility. It tells you how much wattage you're using. It keeps everything together in one list. It finds the best price across several retailers. I use that every time I'm planning a build or just messing with a build or trying to price out. You know, a lot of times we will try and price out what a custom system would be for these boutique machines. If I built it myself, how much would it cost? It's just a really great, like, tool. And I would also say logical increments is another one where that's sort of
places you can go
to
get an
plan.
idea.
Yeah, because I would say the biggest part of a PC isn't building it. Because I've seen people build a PC in 15 minutes. I built a PC for my friend. He wanted to play Rocket League, and I had him build it. I didn't touch anything.
Yeah.
Well, until I had to RMA the motherboard, but a different story. But I had him do everything. It really, you know, I just told him, put that down in there, and now screw these in. Now plug that in there, ground yourself here. And I just explained everything, and it probably took us an hour.
Really, that's
the first time. And he didn't know anything about computers, and this was like his first foray into it. And he even said, like now he'll like see a computer and be like, oh, well, I know that's, as a window. And it's like, well, there's the CPU, and there's the cooler, and here's the RAM, and he kind of understands what those things do as a result. It used to be really difficult. I built a first computer for the first time in like 6th grade, and it was a mess. It was awful, and you had to deal with ribbon cables going in the wrong way, and you had to set jumpers on the motherboard for the right things, and like even that was sort of like a big step ahead from what it had been.
Yeah. So but now it's a little bit simpler. It's not so quite as intimidating as one would maybe think.
It's so easy to do. Yeah, it's absolutely. I think that's something that is really intimidating. Is this idea of like getting all these parts and what do I do with them? But
well, I think, and we've got a few things we want to talk about with this, and we do want to take your questions. So go ahead and drop those in there on Facebook and YouTube. But I'm seeing a couple of people talking about this. Chad, how's the expense difference? Keelan's saying, I used to build my own, but then the price point switched long ago, and it got cheaper to buy than build. How do you feel about that? Like just on the sheer price level, before we get into the next steps of making it. What do you think about that for pricing in general?
So I think the thing about it is that like one, you can spend any amount of money on these machines.
Right.
Like the price level is going to vary so sharply, like whether you want to buy, like that the computer I built for him was $350.
Yeah.
The last computer I built was $1,200. So it's like, they can swing even further than that. But I will say, it really depends what you're getting for that money can really vary. So if you do, talking about like building it yourself versus a custom built,
yeah,
sometimes you can get a custom built PC cheaper than those parts would cost on their own.
Okay.
But again, a lot of cases that's not going to be a computer that you'd want to use. There are going to be issues with the case, or there's going to be issues with the motherboard or with the hard drives. Like there's going to be something about it that is allowing them to get that price point low enough.
Yeah.
Especially with gaming hardware, one thing that lightweights and 2-in-1s and these laptops and have been more and more capable lately in the last few years. Like even when I started reviewing products 3 years ago, laptops and 2-in-1s were awful. Like I got a 2-in-1 that was just terrible. And now that's a good category, and there's a lot of good options there for people. So people need something that either just does the job for them, and then there's this whole other category of people who still need power, who still want to do workstation stuff, who want to do Blender, who want to game, who want to stream and capture.
Want to do everything all in one.
Right.
Yeah.
And for them, it's become this enthusiast thing. It's become enthusiast hardware, and that has made custom building become a lot more attractive again, because for the same price, this Asus Strix, sure, you might be able to get parts pretty close to, like, you might be earning a little bit of value there even, but usually, like in that one I said I priced it out like $1,200-$1,300. It can depend.
For buying off the shelf,
right? Asus, if you just bought the same parts, which is kind of tricky because again, Asus is using a B350 motherboard that they built themselves to be cheap, or they were using in another product and moved it over, and they got cases from somewhere that gets them really cheap too.
Right, because they're built in with that massive discount that they're going to get for buying the stuff. So so it's the balance of that. Can you get that exact same stuff at the price level to where it's
well, I'd say you're getting better stuff. You're going to get a motherboard that has better connectivity and better feature set. You're going to get a graphics card that's overclocked. So even if you are spending $100 or $200 more, which I can't imagine most places you're going to be able to get a pre-built, and that's more than $100 or $200 lower than the parts inside of it,
right?
Because people will just open it up and take the parts out and sell them, because that's the kind of marketplace that we're in with gaming PCs and gaming desktops, is that parts are a commodity.
Well, and let's talk about that as far as the parts side. So again, if you're just joining in, we're kind of getting towards the end of this, but talking about gaming PCs, whether you buy one, a pre-built one from a custom boutique center, or whether and we were talking about the Origin Neuron computer, whether you buy one off the shelf like the Asus, or whether you build it yourself, which seems to be what a lot of people, as we were saying in the chat, seem to either be the build it yourself or buy it from a custom build. But there are some issues right now with building it yourself and getting all of the parts. And we actually talked about this on last week's show. In particular, I think it was GPUs.
Mid-range GPUs are really expensive.
For some reason, if you've gone out there and tried to buy a mid-range GPU right now, you've probably noticed that the price is abnormally high. And it seems ridiculous when the MSRP on these things is like
$200 or less.
$200, and they're going for $400 or $400 right now. And there's a reason for that happening, and we went into it last week. We're not going to go too far into it, but we're just things like Bitcoin Bitcoin is actually driving the price of GPUs. Watch last week's episode for a further explanation on that. It's way too complicated to explain shortly, but that's something to definitely factor in if you're going to be building your own.
Yeah,
right?
There's all sorts of weird things that can happen that can drive the price of one part up. Or, people always ask when's the best time to do it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, any time is, because there's just this constantly like running sort of like wave of processors and GPUs and hard drives like all the time. So you've just got to, at some point, you've just got to say, this is the computer I'm going to build. And someone pointed out, an i7-3930K that Jacob says that he's running, and it works great. That's a 4 or 5 year old processor at this point, and it's still running great. Like that, that makes sense, because that's kind of the value of these enthusiast parts, is that they're doing their job well, and the power curve hasn't been that much higher recently. So it's allowing these things to have a lot more value if you get the good parts, if you get the good warranty, and you treat them well, and you cool them nicely, and that sort of thing can have a big long-term benefit.
Yeah, and that's something you can use for years and years, like you just said.
And it's a nice thing too, that this GPU thing is kind of weird, because it's made $200 price point sort of hard to access, which is at sort of the right price point for 1080p. If you're trying to spend $200 on a GPU, you're looking at playing at 1080p at 60 frames per second, and you're going to do pretty well there at $200. If you already bought one of those cards, an RX 480 or an RX 580 for $200 before, a lot of people are putting them back in the box, selling them on eBay for $300 or $400, and picking up the 1070. They're moving up a rung on the power scale. So this is
because you can get the 1070 right now for that
price, because the miners don't want the 1070, so it's a $350, $400 GPU.
And as Michael said, it's miners that are driving up the prices, which is exactly what we were saying too. That's a valid option. I mean, if you have one of those, why not jump up to the next level?
Totally. And that's the thing, especially GPUs, CPUs, if they're in good working order, motherboards, they hold their price really, really well. So they're not, it's not like people sort of imagine there's always new parts coming out and that kind of thing. But a 750 Ti, brand new, if you can find one, is still $110, $120.
Yeah.
And you'd never buy that new, because you can get a 1050 Ti for $100, which is going to be, 3 generations newer. But it's still holding its price, and if you have one, you can still sell it for $100.
That's pretty great.
So the value proposition, if you're looking at a long-term investment, is really good on a gaming PC right now, because of that enthusiast market. There's always demand for mid-range and budget-friendly hardware, and even for high-end hardware. The GPU thing the mining thing has also caused a surge in kilowatt, 1,000-watt power supplies. These really high-end, $200 power supplies have jumped in price because miners need them. They need huge power supplies.
It's fascinating how many different factors come into building a gaming PC, and like just these outside influences that sometimes you wouldn't even think about, but are influencing exactly that.
Which is why I think it's so much harder to plan than it is to build. That because people, especially, I'll help build PCs for people, and I'll send them a PC part picker list, and I'll say, here's what you should get. And a week and a half later, they're coming back to me, and they're like, it went up $400 in price. And it's like, well, I picked an SSD that was on sale at the time, and I picked a power supply. So it's sort of like, if you're ready to build a PC, you've got to be ready right now, or you'd be ready to buy the parts that are cheap and wait for the other ones to come on sale again. So there's just a lot of planning, waiting, strategizing. Right. Should I maybe go on to this GPU instead because this one won't fit? Whatever.
Which is some of the fun of it as well.
I think it's fun.
So I think that's kind of it for today's show. We're going to kind of wrap up here. But again, this is Close to the Metal, talking about gaming PCs. We do this show live every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and then it goes up as a podcast as well on iTunes or Stitcher, wherever you get your podcasts. So please subscribe there and keep this comment thread going if you're watching live on Facebook and YouTube, or if you're watching it later after it was live. Keep putting in your comments there. There's some great information. People have posted some really good links, actually, if you're looking to build your own PC. And also, we've got tons of articles at digitaltrends.com to check out. So go there. Brad has reviews of everything that's ever existed on there, it feels like. And so there's lots of information that you can go to as far as if you're just getting in, if you're just starting to build a gaming PC, or if you're already at that advanced level. Tons of information, all at digitaltrends.com. And I think that's about it. So thanks so much for tuning in. We'll be back next week with another episode.